Oh my goodness. We are live across multiple streaming platforms for the first time in a couple weeks. This is very exciting. It's also championship week. Fantasy Sports Markets presents FSM Football Sunday. What is good, everybody? Welcome in. He's Justin Fensterman, the outstanding host of Wake Up Fantasy Sports on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I am, of course, Ben Heisler with Fantasy Sports Markets. And Fensty, happy Week 16 to you, brother. We've made it an entire season together. And this is a very exciting time because a lot of championships are on the line.
That's right. It's time. There is no other options besides dominating. And for those who aren't in the finals right now, this is redemption week right here. We're the redeemed team that you need to still win that ring today and to cash out right before the holidays. So get ready. We're doing it live, Ben.
We're doing it live. Right below, you will see something that says send us your lineup questions. We encourage you guys to be a part of the show. It's helped make this show so much fun each and every week. Try and keep them to your top 2 or 3 questions. Don't give us your entire team. And there's some serious questions on the line, Fancy. But before we get to that, I just want to take a quick second to mention something really cool that we're doing over at FantasySportsMarkets.com. By the way, as we do every week, if you use promo code NFL18, that'll get you $5 on us, non-salary DFS over at FantasySportsMarkets.com. You head on over there, you type that in, you can use that in any of our contests, including all the NFL contests, including all the NBA contests, NHL. What else do we have going on? College basketball. It's all available for you, but I'm going to take it off the screen because there is one contest, Fensty, that we can't use that promo code in because we need everybody who enters this contest to pay with real money because 100% of the proceeds in this contest, Fensty, are going to pediatric cancer research to our friends at Noah's Bandage Project. I had the opportunity to come on your show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and talk about this. It's an unbelievable cause. And Royal Star pitcher Danny Duffy has agreed to join up with us and with an amazing organization called Noah's Bandage Project, which was started after a young man named Noah Wilson was 6 years old. He was fighting cancer. He was in the hospital, and he didn't like the fact that they were giving out all these boring bandages whenever you had to get shots, whenever you had to get treatment. And so he wanted to help change. He wanted to put some smiles on people's faces. And so he collected all these fun and really unique bandages to help all these kids out, to make some new friends in the hospital. And his legacy is remembered through Noah's Bandage Project. So if you go to FantasySportsMarkets.com, if you go to the Beat Danny Duffy NBA contest for Christmas Day, Fensty, 100% of the proceeds will go directly to pediatric cancer research. I can't think of a better cause this holiday season, and you get to go head-to-head against Danny Duffy and possibly win an autographed baseball, win a bunch of money at Fantasy Sports Markets. I think this is a perfect time to celebrate the holiday season and play a little DFS too.
That's what it's all about, because it's not only a time of receiving gifts and receiving fantasy information, but it's also a time for giving, and that's where all of you come in, and all of us are going to be giving and helping that cause. And, of course, also giving to the fact that we're going to beat Danny Duffy. Can I explain that he's a Lakers fan? Whoops, was that a secret I wasn't supposed to let out there?
No, that is very much in the clear. Everybody is fully aware of his Laker fandom. And the thing is that you know LeBron's going to be in the lineup. Now, I'm not saying you fade LeBron, because you probably should have him in, especially on Christmas Day. It's a very ideal matchup for him. But maybe you move a couple guys here and there. Maybe Durant isn't necessarily 100% your guy. It's Christmas Day, Fancy, so literally all the stars are playing for NBA. And so this is just one of those ideal opportunities you can really take advantage of. If you're looking for a little bit of correlation plays or move off the main slate, there's a lot of good ways to go here.
Yeah, I'll give you one clue right now. When the Knicks are on the slate, you attack the Knicks everything. It used to be just attack the Knicks guards. But, hey, the Knicks stink, so fire in all of your Milwaukee Bucks if you're looking to be different, because when it comes to making lineups on FantasySportsMarkets.com, while it is great to go chalk, you also have to remember that you have to be a little bit unique as well. So attack those Knicks, let me tell you.
Attack them 100%. I think that's a really smart way to go, especially early in the day. You can get a couple of guaranteed points up on your team, and then you're feeling completely set. All right, so Fancy, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, obviously with the championships afloat, there's a lot of injury concerns. There's a lot of major guys that we're still trying to get some answers about. What can you tell us at the beginning so far as we're leading up to injury sit-em and stardoms for what we know now?
Right now, Adam Schefter saying that the Rams, quote, would like to sit Todd Gurley if any concerns about the knee does come up. Now, let's backtrack a bit to the start of the season, where when you don't handcuff your running backs and you grab Todd Gurley, You knew that this was going to be a potential issue, even if he was 100%, Ben. But now he actually has a legit knee injury, and that's why I was surprised in Week 15 that the Rams brought him back after he was icing his knee on the bench. It really shocked me because that's very, very risky right there. You bring him back in, one bad cut, and boom, he's done for the playoffs for them. So that's something that you've had to prepare for all season long, and this is why for next year, a big goal, because it's almost New Year's, so New Year's resolution to all of you fantasy football players, you have to handcuff. You just have to do it. Don't invest in the running back, invest in the run game.
So it's good that you bring that up, because I think that's probably the biggest question that we're going to get today is what do I do with Todd Gurley? Even if he decides to play, we don't know if he's going to be 100%. We don't know how active he's going to be. You have C.J. Anderson that was brought in, John Kelly, who was the backup to the backup of Malcolm Brown. There could be a theoretical three-way committee, which I don't necessarily understand. The Rams have an ideal matchup on the road against Arizona. To me, this feels like just go ahead and sit Todd Gurley and get the win that you're supposed to.
Right, exactly. And they have no reason to play him at this point. I know they want home field. I know they want to lock that up, but they're such a powerful team that they should have confidence that no matter where they play, they should be good to go. I understand the importance where fantasy and reality kind of mix and clash a little bit is the home field advantage, not really meaning anything to us in fantasy right now, Ben. But this is why playoffs, and this is why all of your seasons should be ending in Week 16 and not Week 17 because of stuff like this, because now your coveted #1 overall pick might not play. That's 20 points out the window for you right there. So next year, you're going to invest in a running back early, really early, first overall. Invest in the handcuff as well.
I think you're spot on. And I had a fascinating conversation, too, with Matt Kelly from the Roto Underworld radio show from playerprofiler.com. He was one of the guests this week on the Fantasy Sports Markets podcasts. And I was talking to him about like how early some of these guys should be able to go. And obviously, you know, I think people are looking at the season that Pat Mahomes has had and said, okay, if there's that much variance between #1 and #2 at the quarterback position, think about this from this perspective. And we got a question coming in from Matthias. We'll get to you. It's a quarterback toss-up in just a second. Again, feel free to send us your questions, guys, either on Facebook Live, here on Restream, on Periscope, on YouTube Live, wherever you want to send us your questions. We will make sure that we get them and read them. And if you don't see it pop up on the screen, send it again. We will make sure that we do our best. Sometimes we don't see everyone that comes in. So if you miss it, send it again. We'll be able to get to it there. But we were talking, Fensty, about how somebody like Mahomes, he has a 65-point differential between him and the #2 quarterback in fantasy this year, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. 65-point difference between #1 and #2. There is a 55-point difference between the #2 quarterback and the #12 quarterback in fantasy this year. So we asked the question, well, how early would you reach to have that type of an advantage? And he said, even though you might think, you know, 4th or 5th round, 3rd round even, he said, no, you have to load up, because after that point, everybody is so bunched up and tied together. So if you're going to make that investment early on in that early running back, you have to handcuff. You have to make sure. I did it on a spur of the moment with James Conner. I didn't even draft Le'Veon Bell. I just knew that there was going to be opportunity there. And so rather you're just chasing some guy that you may not even know about, if you're worried about potential issues down the road, these handcuffs have never been more important.
No, you're right, Ben. And something else you just mentioned I want to bring up. You mentioned some of the top quarterbacks in fantasy this season. And notice how you didn't mention Aaron Rodgers. You didn't mention Deshaun Watson. You didn't mention Tom Brady. See, you don't have to draft a quarterback so early. You don't have to draft Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round. You can wait. Patrick Mahomes, guys like him, Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, these were draft picks that you made in the 11th and 12th round.
Yo, I think you're absolutely on. And again, it's crazy to think about how all those guys basically, they busted for you. Aaron Rodgers has not had the type of fantasy season that you need from him. And again, I was somebody that reached on Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd or 4th round. I thought he was in a fantastic spot this year. Just didn't happen. Didn't work out the way that we wanted it to go. So we'll see what happens ultimately. I think this is one of those ideal situations this week. I think Green Bay and the Jets, it's a little bit sneaky. So we'll get to those. Let's start with a question coming in. It's a quarterback toss-up from Matthias Spons, or Matthias Apons. You know how I am with these names, Fensty. It tends to be a little bit of a struggle. Andrew Luck or Josh Allen today? I'll let you go first because to me, this is a very straightforward answer for me.
I mean, I really want to – I mean, the thing is with T.Y. Hilton, that does make me a little bit nervous today. So with T.Y. Hilton being questionable right now, I still really want to go with Andrew Luck. As much as I do like Josh Allen, and I think he will be rushing a lot, LaShawn McCoy is ready to go. Chris Ivory's not going to play, but LaShawn McCoy will still be there, Ben, and that will actually eat into Josh Allen's rushing ability a little bit as well. So I'm wondering if it's not going to be enough of the rushing game for Josh Allen today to put up legit numbers. So I'm wondering, Ben, if Andrew Luck is the right way to go.
I think Andrew Luck is 100% the right way to go. Like, I'm not even thinking twice about it. I wrote an article this week for the Quan Edge about how much I love Andrew Luck this week. Everything just lines up for him. And even though you can attack the Giants through the running game, they've been, I think, bottom 5 the last couple weeks.
Oh, they're awful. They're terrible.
Awful. Yeah.
Marlon Mack should be a top 5 running back this week.
Yeah, Marlon Mack is a great play, but the thing is that even with Marlon Mack being good, there's only been 2 games all year, Fensty, that Andrew Luck has been a complete non-factor. It was last week in that 23-0 win against the Cowboys, which everything really set up well for him to be able to be successful. And in that game where they got shut out against Jacksonville. Every other game, Andrew Luck has had more than 20 fantasy points on fantasy sports markets. Every other week, he's gotten a ton of volume in the passing game. He's second in the NFL in touchdowns. To me, I even if Marlon Mack goes off, I think that can help set up Andrew Luck. He's probably, to be perfectly honest, my favorite cash game quarterback this week on the Sunday main slate. I think Andrew Luck is in a fantastic position, and he's somebody that I'm going to be playing in my Beat Benny Heiss lineup on FantasySportsMarkets.com today.
What happens if T.Y. doesn't play, though?
If T.Y. doesn't play, then I think you knock him down a few. I think then it becomes a little bit more Marlon Mack oriented. I think Eric Ebron becomes even more of a must start. People are going to be off of him after the dud from last week when everything was lining up so perfectly for him. I still don't think Andrew Luck is a bad play if T.Y. Hilton doesn't play, but he's not the clear-cut cash game play that I think he currently is now.
Right.
I think that's a fair question, though. So, Matthias, appreciate the question coming in. It looks like on Periscope, you guys, some of the questions may not be showing up. I just went to check it out, and it says some of the features might be unavailable. So here's what you can do, because there's always something every week. Go to Twitter, and you can either tweet us at FSM Contest or me or Fensty. Try and use the hashtag PlayFSM. So I'll tweet something out, and we can try and get to some of those questions. But meantime, I think, Fensty, what we can do while we're waiting to try and get some of these questions is just start going through the slate, because there's a lot of really intriguing matchups. There's a lot of stuff that we want to be able to get to. So let's start with a really intriguing game that I think a lot of people aren't going to be on. It was a game that I just mentioned. You have Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is set to play, although that was a question mark all throughout the week. It's projected to be a close game, and the total has risen about 1.5 points, with the Packers going from 45.5 all the way up to 47. You're a Jets fan, so I want to get your opinion on this. Sam Darnold looked like a real-ass quarterback.
Don't admit that, Ben. Don't admit that.
Okay. All right. So a guy that you might know something about for whatever reason or another. Sam Darnold looked like a real-ass quarterback last week, and a lot of people are expecting that this could be a week where he really breaks out. And, of course, the big name in the fantasy industry that everyone's going to be on today, who went from a GPP flyer last week to potentially a cash game lock this week, is Robbie Anderson. So what's your perspective here on this matchup?
I mean, definitely Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold look like they're in sync. And overall with Sam Darnold, you have seen the slow growth throughout the season for him. If there's one thing we can rely on, Ben, with Robbie Anderson, it's targets. And for those like yours truly who are in a final and right now, according to projections, are essentially 25 to 30-point underdogs, this is where Robbie Anderson, if you just picked him up, you got to plug him into your lineup here. Over the last few weeks, he's had 7 targets, and then that 11-target game against Houston as well couldn't be more encouraging. So you know the targets will be there. He's scored the last few weeks. Green Bay's defense is horrible
they're
versus
bad.
wide receivers. So, yes, I totally understand. And, yes, you have to remember with Robbie Anderson, he is the priority receiver, but that's not going to stop Sam Darnold, who obviously loves him more than any of his other guys. The run game right now, you can't fully rely on. It's all banged up. So Robbie Anderson is your top option for this Jets team.
All right, we got a question coming in from Mr. Sports Take. He wants to know, it actually involves these New York Jets. Do you go with Elijah McGuire or Matt Breida as a replacement for Todd Gurley? So Gurley, that at least as far as we know, Fensty, we haven't seen any latest updates that indicate that Gurley is 100% out. But let's say for this hypothetical situation for Mr. Sports Take on Periscope that he is out, that he's not going to play. Who do you like more between Elijah McGuire and Matt Breida today? You have McGuire going up against Green Bay, and you have Matt Breida at home against the Bears.
So, Matt Breida's matchup is not the best. Right now, if you're looking at it from a matchup standpoint, you have to say it's Elijah McGuire. The snaps percentage are showing it as well over the last few weeks, trending up for him. So I prefer Elijah McGuire a little bit more. I'm thinking that this game's going to be going on the over side here with the Jets and the Packers, Ben. So with Matt Breida, he did look fine. He looked healthy, but every week with Matt Breida, there's something with that ankle. It's really concerning. And in a more difficult matchup here against the Bears, he's going to be the priority to stop out of anyone else on that team.
I think you're right. I think the other component that's really interesting is that you never know if Breida does end up going down. You like these running back options in Kyle Shanahan's offense. You just never know who it's going to be week in and week out. Like, that's the problem here, is that you just don't know which way he's going to go, and it's already a difficult matchup against Chicago. Now, I do think San Francisco is going to keep this game a little bit closer. They've been a far better team at home. They've won a couple games in a row. The Bears should win this game because I think Trubisky can take advantage of San Francisco's defense, but Trubisky's been known to make some mistakes before. The Bears at this point, unless they think the Rams have a chance to lose and they have a chance to sneak in to that first-round bye, they're pretty much locked in that number 3 seed. So maybe you worry about a little bit of a letdown situation for Chicago in this game against San Francisco.
Right. The thing is with Elijah McGuire, if the carries weren't and the snaps weren't so high, I would say Matt Breida, no-brainer, even in a tough matchup, because he's obviously going to be getting a ton of carries until, like you said, he goes down with yet another leg injury of some kind. So right now, I'm going to go with Elijah McGuire. It's a lot closer than maybe people think because you have to look beyond the matchup here. It is championship week, so you want to start, in a way, you want to think the guys that got you there, but at the same time, Matt Breida is not 100%. And Elijah McGuire is, and in a great spot today.
One of the biggest Sinem or Sardom questions that I've been getting all throughout the week is between Elijah McGuire and Jamal Williams. So it's fascinating because both of these guys are going up head-to-head against each other. Both of them pretty much at this point are the 3 down backs. You occasionally might get a couple spells. Cannon certainly spelled McGuire in the first half last week. McGuire ultimately ended up getting the touchdown and still a few targets in the passing game. We know Williams is going to get targets in the passing game as well. So who do you like more between Elijah McGuire and Jamal Williams today?
From what I saw, I was very encouraged by Williams, and I'm overall not a fan of this guy. But because Aaron Jones is gone, the opportunity presents itself for him. I like Jamal Williams a little bit more than Elijah McGuire. I'm going to go Jamal Williams there. And part of the reason, Ben, is because of the targets. That's why. Yeah. If it was just on the ground game, then, it's a little bit tougher of a decision. But because he was so active in the passing game last week, I'm going to go with Jamal Williams here. On
the other side, about Green Bay, we talked about the Jets' offense and the opportunity that Darnold has with Robbie Anderson. It's crazy to think that Sam Darnold might actually be, a popular cash play on the salary sites. At fantasy sports markets, unless you're going all in with Robbie Anderson and Elijah McGuire, you just want to do a full-on Jets and Packers onslaught, there's really no reason to play Sam Darnold. On the other side, though, how do you feel about Aaron Rodgers as a possible sneaky play at fantasy sports markets? We know that everybody likely is going to be on Pat Mahomes, on Russell Wilson against the Chiefs defense. Ben Roethlisberger, Dak Prescott is at home against Tampa Bay. What about somebody like Aaron Rodgers as a possible sneaky play on fantasy sports markets against the Jets defense?
So the matchup itself is good against the Jets because the Jets absolutely suck. But Aaron Rodgers himself has not been coming through. And that's the problem. And by the way, an injury we have to talk about here, no Randall Cobb, it's looking like, with with the concussion. It's not confirmed, but that's something you have to think about when it comes to the Packers' weapons that they're throwing out there. But it's Aaron Rodgers, Ben. That's the problem. It's not the matchup. The matchup dictates that he should be able to smash today. And a perfect option on FSM because we're actually saying that Aaron Rodgers is a point of uniqueness going into championship week. So the matchup itself is perfect for him. But Aaron Rodgers has not been the same guy over the last few weeks.
The reason that I feel really good about him as a tournament play on fantasy sports markets this week is because of how good I feel about Davante Adams. Davante Adams has been the #1 scoring wide receiver on fantasy sports markets this year. You have to go back to the New England game where he had his lowest output of the season. That was 16 points. There is no better cash receiver right now, better than Julio Jones, better than DeAndre Hopkins, certainly better than Tyreek Hill, even Michael Thomas, even better than Antonio Brown. There is no better cash wide receiver than Davante Adams. He is a lock button for me in the Beat Benny Heist contest this week. And I think if you want to get those guaranteed points, Aaron Rodgers, he says he wants to play even though the season is lost. I think he's really sneaky, and I think he could have a really good game today.
Would you say for FSM it's smarter to take a share on Rodgers instead of Davante Adams? Because if you want to make your lineup and potential perfect roster bonus so unique, then you go with Rodgers instead? Or do you feel like you have to either stack them both? Because I feel like, Ben,
great question.
On FSM especially, I feel like you can't just go with Davante Adams. If you're going to invest in this Packers situation, I feel like the way to go is either stack them both or invest in just Aaron Rodgers.
So I think it depends on how you're trying to play it, right? And for those of you that are unfamiliar with what Fensty is talking about, at Fantasy Sports Markets, again, promo code NFL18, we'll get you $5 for free on us without a deposit required. It's a great way, especially if you've been knocked out of your season-long league. Get on board. Try FSM for free for $5. The only one that you can't use that in is in the Beat Danny Duffy Christmas Day contest because we need those to be cash. 100% of the proceeds are going directly to Noah's Bandage Project to benefit pediatric cancer research. If you're looking for the... Go ahead.
Wait. If you're out of your leagues, Ben, you know what's better than winning one fantasy football championship or tournament? 2 fantasy football championships or tournaments. So even if you're in the finals, keep the winning. You're obviously good at fantasy football. Win. Enter these contests right now. Let everybody else be a Debbie Downer and cry on the sideline. You're going to enter, and you're going to win multiple rings.
Yes, all the rings, all the contests, all the GPPs. Again, they're smaller contests with opportunity for big money upside. You can turn a $10 entry at Fantasy Sports Markets into $50,000. Same with our $5 Sunday contest, our $5 Saturday through Monday contest. Even the $1 Beat Benny Heist has a $1,000 perfect roster bonus. So there's a lot of money, over $160,000 up for grabs. But let's answer your question because I think this is really important. Because a lot of people, they want to go after those perfect roster bonuses. They want to go after that big money. You need to take some chances here, but it's usually not the crazy plays that people miss out on. For example, Tariq Cohen back in Week 13 was one of the top perfect running backs on the board. I think the other one was Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott. He was one of the studs that everybody else was playing. 2 weeks ago was Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper had 3 touchdowns, 0% of the field played him. Everybody played the chalk. So I think in one sense, Fensty, if you're trying to win, Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, I think you can have in one lineup together. But I think if you're moving away from it, yeah, you can take a chance with Rodgers. But if you're taking the chance with Rodgers, you want Davante Adams in there. I think you want that quarterback wide receiver correlation. But
I will say, Ben, if I can add in Randall Cobb, Adam Schefter just tweeted that Randall Cobb is expected to be out in this matchup.
Okay, so if Cobb is out, I think that puts even more targets towards Davante Adams. Like I know that everyone's going to be here. If we're going to guess the top 2 wide receivers in ownership this week on Fantasy Sports Markets, who would you guess they would be? I would put Michael Thomas in that category because I think a lot of people are going to want to play Drew Brees and a lot of people are going to want to play Ben Roethlisberger. Do you think I'm right on that?
No, I do. I also think that because of Juju Smith-Schuster's health concerns, that Antonio Brown on FSM will be a contender for that top 2 spot as well.
Right. And again, Smith-Schuster has not been officially ruled out, correct?
No.
And he also made a post.
He's banged up.
he is banged up, but he also made a post saying that he's not going to let his fantasy owners down, that he wants to be able to play. Isn't that great? Like, even if he can't go, the fact that he recognized that this is a billion-dollar industry where a lot of people know him because of fantasy football, I think it's good to be self-aware. Like, if you're a fan and you're giving guys shit for being hurt, then that's one thing. But at least recognize the fact, for if you're a player, that there's a lot of people that have heard of you because of fantasy football. So I thought what he did was pretty cool.
I do too, but also from the athlete's standpoint that he put himself out there to get a ton of crap, and people blaming their entire season. They lost their mortgage because of Juju Smith-Schuster's lack of production. So when he puts that out there, as much as I'm proud of someone who's been in the fantasy industry for almost a decade now, I love seeing that, but he's also now opened himself to criticism if he doesn't come through, Ben.
As far as the Pittsburgh-New Orleans game goes, and again, we're continuing to wait for your questions here. I know that some people have been saying that they've had some issues over on Periscope and on Facebook Live. So we'll go to some of your guys' Twitter questions in just a second. As far as that Pittsburgh-New Orleans game goes, I think, like we talked about, a lot of people are going to be on Drew Brees. It's crazy to think that he hasn't gone over 205 yards in the past 4 weeks with how dynamic that offense was for the first 11, 12 weeks of the season, but he's back in the Dome. I expect this game to be a full-on shootout, and maybe that's the popular opinion, and maybe I'm siding with the public here. I know that both of these defenses, too, Fensty, have looked really, really good. I just think both of them are going to want to push the football down the field. And Ben Roethlisberger, people worry about the road splits with him, being away from Heinz Field. He's in a dome. It's a late afternoon start. I think both of these quarterbacks are outstanding plays. Even if Smith-Schuster isn't 100%, Ben still has lots of weapons to be able to go to here.
Right, and that's the thing with this game, 53 total right now, and the spread being 6.5, and the Steelers getting the points here. They're going to be throwing a lot, both of these teams here. But I got to ask you this, Ben, because the second highest total on the board is this game. Do you expect there to be more points scored overall in this game or that Kansas City-Seattle Sunday night game?
So that's a really good question. I think it'll ultimately end up being this game. It is surprising, though, to see Kansas City and Seattle continue to climb up. And I've been on board as this being a back-and-forth game. I just think there's going to be more points in the Superdome. It has that Coors Field type of effect. So I think that's probably the highest scoring game. But for anybody, this is, I think, a really important note. If you are watching this show and you have concerns about playing Pat Mahomes on the road at Seattle today, I think that is a grave mistake. I really like Pat Mahomes this week. I was considering playing him in my Beat Benny Heist contest, and especially if T.Y. Hilton doesn't go, I probably will. Pat Mahomes has gone on the road and put up dynamic numbers. He's done it against the Rams. He's done it against the Patriots. He's done it in really tough matchups. Even against the Ravens, he put up a couple touchdowns. Last week against the Chargers, he did too, and then they took his foot off the gas pedal in the second half. There is no matchup, Fensty, that Pat Mahomes cannot handle, including the Seahawks in Seattle. You think that's going to faze Pat Mahomes? I don't think so. I think he's in line for 300-plus yards and a couple touchdowns today.
I love that, too, and I'm thinking the same thing. And the thing with Patrick Mahomes is, and again, this is why you don't need to draft quarterbacks so early, because of guys like Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes has been able to succeed. By the way, Spencer Ware, as Adam Schefter just tweeted out, is going to be out for this game against Seattle. So get ready for more Damian Williams questions, Ben, because they are coming, let me tell you.
All right.
He's just... we're waiting to see flaws from Patrick Mahomes. And every week I watch him, where I guarantee you all the critics, everyone's looking for them. I can't find them with this guy. With how mobile he's pocket, I can't find flaws with Patrick Mahomes.
He's been awesome. And week in and week out, he's been about as consistent. He'll throw a couple interceptions. He'll take a couple chances down the field. But, man, isn't that what you want? Don't you want a quarterback that has the stones to be able to make some of these throws and make plays happen and not just check it down? I guess it depends on sort of whatever situation that you're in. Like I was trying to talk my way into another situation. No, I would want Mahomes in any situation. If you have a really good defense, like the Bears. The Bears could have had Pat Mahomes. And I'm still a believer in Trubisky, by the way. I haven't given up on him, and I think he's had a pretty terrific season.
Yeah, you shouldn't give up on him at all. You should be proud of the growth that you've seen in his second year.
He's still so raw. The only starting 12, 13 games in college, then playing half a season under John Fox, and then getting a real offensive mind. You see the flashes of brilliance. You see why they took him at number 2 and traded up to the San Francisco 49ers to take that pick, because they wanted him. I think it's very
Right.
clear. They didn't get him, so they traded for Garoppolo, and the rest is history. One other one coming in from Mr. Sports Take. He says, I think Kamara is a top 2 running back this week. I expect a big game from him. Well, we were talking about this game, Fensty. I think the clear-cut cash running backs this week are Zeke Elliott and Christian McCaffrey. I think we can both agree to that, especially with no Cam Newton. The offense is going to have to go through McCaffrey here. But then afterwards, Saquon Barkley on the road at Indianapolis. The Colts did a really good job of slowing down Ezekiel Elliott. Barkley didn't have a good game last week, so there might be some people off of him. And then there's Alvin Kamara, who in the last several weeks, he hasn't put up the numbers, Fensty, that we've become accustomed to from Kamara. If anything, Christian McCaffrey this year is almost like an Alvin Kamara on steroids. But if you expect this to be a shootout, if you expect a lot of passing in this game, don't you feel like Alvin Kamara is a fantastic play this week?
Not only a fantastic play, but a safe option as well, because we've seen Drew Brees spread the ball around. And for those Michael Thomas owners who were frustrated down the stretch, yeah, that's why, because he's been getting all the receivers involved here. So what do I do in that regard? I focus more on the consistent weapon, and that right now is Alvin Kamara is the safest option on this team. But I'm going to ask you this, Ben. Alvin Kamara this week or Nick Chubb in an excellent matchup here against Cincy?
I am more likely to go with Kamara, although I think Chubb is an awesome, awesome play. I think both of them, I would play both of them in cash, although I would prefer to play.
Because Chubb dominated, and I'm talking crushed the Bengals earlier this year.
Yeah, he was unbelievable against them, and I think he should, especially in a game. It's crazy to think that Cleveland is 10-point home. The Cleveland Browns are 10-point home favorites. Like, what? We're living in a society. Like, when does that happen? I also think that number's too big, by the way. It's a divisional game against in Week 16 in cold weather, and Cincinnati is bad, but they're not 10-point road dog bad against the Cleveland Browns. I would take Cincinnati.
I have a decision that I'm currently making right now in our league in which I'm the championship in, and you're not, unfortunately. So sorry about that. But I'm deciding, ready for this, between the Browns defense against Driscoll or the Falcons defense against Heineke today. That's what I'm deciding on for my championship.
That's a really, really tough call.
Yeah.
I feel really good about Cleveland's. Well, no, because, I mean, here, I would go Cleveland, and here's why. Because there's no film on Heineke other than preseason film. And so we've seen a couple times this year. Look at Mullins in that first week for him in San Francisco. Who was the backup quarterback before Mullins ended up taking over? A lot of times you see these backup quarterbacks in their first game. Chase Daniel in that game against Detroit. Or I think that was his first start when Trubisky was out. For whatever reason,
a few weeks ago, when it was the Giants versus the Redskins, I started the Giants defense against Mark Sanchez.
Yeah, but we also had tape on Mark Sanchez.
You're right. You are right on that.
So I think there's a possibility that Heineke, he's not going to light anybody up, but you still have a lot of weapons in McCaffrey. You have explosive wide receivers. I think I'd probably lean, and there's no A.J. Green, there's no Tyler Boyd. I think you got to go Cleveland here, and just they'll stack the box on Joe Mixon, and if they have to force everything through Joe Mixon, then so be it. Because it's just a recipe for not scoring a lot of points. I just think you have to trust Cincinnati to show up in a division game and at least make it competitive. I think they can, because I don't buy all this love for Cleveland, even though they seem to be the fun team to pick right now. 10-point favorites at home just seems way too much. Right.
No, I'm with you there. I'm with you. And speaking of Cincinnati, it's like outside of Mixon, it's everybody's trying to make C.J. Uzomah, like he has a really great matchup, but he seems to be just more of a blocker. And so that's why it's hard for me to trust most of these options here on Cincinnati. Right. You're going to trust Mixon, but who else, Ben? I can't trust anyone else on this team.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. You go Cleveland's defense there, and there's really not a whole lot of options to like. But I think it's a really good toss-up between Kamara and Chubb. I think I have one tournament lineup. That is Kamara and Chubb, and I'm fading Zeke, McCaffrey, and Barkley entirely. And that way you get a little bit more. You have a little bit more options. Because I want to have exposure to one of those guys at some point. So I think Kamara, Chubb, both of them are great options in GPPs. Hey, my buddy Davo checks in. Good man, Davo. Gave me a great book, by the way, called Dueling with Sharks. Or Dueling with Kings, I should say, by Dan Barbarisi, one of my favorite reads of the season. Season-long championship. Do I go with Nick Foles or Josh Allen? I had Cam Newton. Foles is intriguing because you can pass on Houston. Now, you worry about him taking some sacks and throwing a couple picks and maybe a couple forced fumbles here and there because that front seven can get to you. But you got 35-year-old Jonathan Joseph guarding Alshon Jeffrey on the outside. That's an advantageous matchup for Foles. And you have to admit, Fensty, even though I like to look at the numbers, I like to look at the situations, the Eagles' offense looked revitalized and they looked woken up. And they're at home against Houston. And Houston is a far better team and a more impressive team at home than on the road. I think I'm leaning Nick Foles here. What about you?
I'm leaning Nick Foles as well. I think the ceiling is higher for him. I mean, I have my own concerns, as I mentioned before, with Josh Allen for today. But Nick Foles, to me, just the matchup, you can't fully rely on what you saw last week. This is great. You can attack Houston's secondary very easily, Ben. And it's not like Nick Foles doesn't have the experience. We've seen him before do this last year. So you have to have that on your side as well when deciding this game. Now, the Patriots know the big thing with stopping Josh Allen is keeping him from being mobile. So if that's what they have to do is stop this run game when it comes to LaShawn McCoy and Josh Allen for today, that's what the Patriots really need to focus on. They want to give up a little bit of coverage on Foster, fine. But they got to stop this run game. That's their main responsibility. With that, I'm going Nick Foles.
I think Foles is the way to go, but the real question is this. Because of Foles' ability to run, does that give him a safer floor than Foles here? Even though it's a tougher matchup on the road against the Patriots, that's them coming off of a two-game losing streak?
Well, that's the thing. You know what? You're right about that. You know, it does give him a little bit of a secure floor for him. But the thing with Nick Foles right now that you have to remember is that he does have options. He does have weapons. So I'm really relying on Nick Foles just crushing that secondary today. That's the big thing with him.
And he's also, on the salary sites, he's also going to be a pretty popular cash option today as well.
Right.
The question, I think, will be whether or not you pair him with Jeffrey or whether you pair him with Zach Ertz. Jeffrey is probably going to be the more popular target based on his game last week. I think a lot of people are down on Ertz, and they shouldn't be. He's had a terrific season from the tight end spot, and I think there's really good value there. Here's an interesting prop that's showed up here on Periscope. Now with Damian Williams, I get my 1001 question on Damian Williams. Over under 100 total yards from scrimmage for Damian Williams as the lead back for Kansas City on the road at Seattle. So here's the other thing, too, that I think people need to realize, is that just because I think Mahomes can have a good game against Seattle and you can go deep on them, doesn't necessarily mean that the running game is going to be the way that it looked against the Chargers. I think people looked at the Chargers and said, oh, yeah, like you shouldn't be able to run all over him. Damian Williams looks like a man possessed. And he had a great game, and he helped people move on to the fantasy championship. So I like Damian Williams, but, I mean, is he in the same category as like a Joe Mixon this week? You know, probably not. Certainly not in the conversation of a Nick Chubb. Like him a lot more than Alfred Blue, who's going to get the start, I can tell you that. But like, if you're asking me, like, okay, between James White and Damian Williams, I think it's closer than people would anticipate.
Right. But the thing that is with this prop here is that I still think it's going to be under, but I do think Damian Williams is going to be productive because of the passing game, the passing factor that you have to take into consideration. So I don't want to confuse our viewers and listeners here, Ben, because Damian Williams is in a good spot today.
Oh,
but he's going to get
right for sure.
He's going to get some targets. I don't feel as confident about the 100+ rushing yards, but I feel confident he is going to get some receptions today.
All right, let me give you another toss-up here. Damian Williams or Chris Carson?
Ooh, that is a tough one.
Because if we're talking about passing game opportunities, if we're talking about PPR, I think Williams is the better play. Carson, you have to be, if you're going to be in on Carson, you have to believe that Seattle is either going to be close in this game or they're going to have a lead on Kansas City. That's the only way that Carson's going to play a role down to the second half of this football game, right? Because that's what Seattle does. When they have the ball, they sit on the lead. That's why every Russell Wilson game is always super close, because he's either going to be throwing the ball and chucking it downfield when if they're behind, and if they're on top, then they're going to give the ball and feed it to Carson. They're going to be much more run-oriented. I think Williams' role is a little bit more secure in this game, because I think Kansas City is either going to be going back and forth with them throughout the day, or they're going to have the lead.
Right. I'm going to go Williams here, and that's also because I'm waiting to hear if Rashad Penny is actually going to be active or not. That's a big injury concern concern, and being that we have to take the passes and catches into effect here, I'm thinking that it's going to be a bigger Williams day. By the way, we'll also say this, that just coming down here on Twitter is that James Palmer from NFL Network actually saying that DeAndre Hopkins will play. So reports are out that he is going to play in this matchup.
Got DeAndre Hopkins running in a championship league, so that is very encouraging news. If he didn't play, then I was going to have a major punted quarterback because I have Watson and Hopkins scheduled together. Have used Melvin Gordon last night. Thankfully, he got me the touchdown. And then the Titans defense came through for me as well. One more from Dave. Appreciate you watching, man. Thanks for the kind comments as well. He said, my last question would be, how will Josh Gordon's targets be divided? Would love to start Hogan, but worried about, I'm trying to see the rest of it, but worried about Ladarius on him. That's a really tough question. I think Hogan will be, his snap count will go way, 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 way up. And I think you're talking about Tre'Davious White, Dave. Tre'Davious White's the shutdown corner. He usually tends to play on the outside. And I think that's a legitimate concern. He's one of the best cover shutdown corners in the NFL. I talked about this a little bit on the podcast, Fensty. I think if you're looking at the situation for New England, got my news confused. If you're looking at the situation for New England, who picks up the Josh Gordon opportunities? I think Hogan gets a few of them. To me, I look at it and say, this is kind of where James White starts to return, don't you think? Because
you just mentioned him.
Yeah, he's the guy, especially early on in the season when they didn't have Josh Gordon, when they were waiting for Julian Edelman to come up. Edelman is already getting 10 to 12, 13 targets a game. It's like the Tyler Boyd effect. You can't get that much more targets. So I think they're going to use James White. I think they're going to move Rex Burkhead around a little bit. But I expect James White to get more involved in the passing game and have him look more like the early down James White, the early season one. That's who I think really benefits the most here.
Will they force the ball to Gronk a little bit more? That's a big question.
It's Buffalo, and he historically has been awesome against them. But, man, you watched him last week. He looked slow.
He's not the same.
He looked just like he could barely move out there. I have very little confidence in Gronk, and maybe I should have a little bit of exposure to him today, but there's just no indication to me that says he's going to go out and make a bunch of plays.
Right. And Buffalo they're good against tight ends. Now, I know it's not the same Gronk. Like, you can't say to me or Ben that it's Gronk. That's over. It's done. We are past that time. Gronk is not in a category of his own anymore. He's just another tight end in what has been a crazy tight end situation outside of Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz, who we expected to have big seasons from. I mean, look at some of the top guys. We're talking about Eric Ebron. Mm-hmm. We're talking about George Kittle. Yeah. These guys have the top tight ends outside of the chalk ones that I just mentioned before. I mean, Jared Cook, especially in the first half of the season. I mean, these are guys with tight end position you're talking about. You can't just say, it's Gronk, he'll get it done. Because that's how you lose championships.
I think that's spot on, too. You have to play it smart here. You really, really do. It's tough. In season long, I played him last week, and I got screwed because of it. You know, I thought, especially after all the targets, that he'd look good, and the reality was that I sort of took the scouting part of it, the hashtag watch the games component completely out of it. And there could have been better options. Like if you had, Rob Gronkowski or Jared Cook, both of them were terrible, but at least you had the understanding of Cook was running routes and he was efficient. He was the leading target guy on the team. These are the decisions that you have to make. So I don't feel confident in Gronk at all, but maybe my recency bias is playing a role here.
Well, then let's shift it. Let's go to Chris Hogan then, because here's the thing with Chris Hogan. Before the season, everybody was saying, this is Tom Brady's guy. This is a guy that you should spend on for your wide receiver 3. Spend the extra few dollars in your auctions on him. This is Tom Brady's guy. Probably want to wrap Christmas presents with Chris Hogan. Where's that been all year? Where's that been? You're going to tell me last week against the Steelers when he got just 3 targets, and yes, he did score, but you're going to tell me that was an amazing put the confidence, that vote of confidence into Chris Hogan? It's so hard to do that, Ben.
I know. And so if he's worth a dart throw maybe in tournaments on salary sites, and that's it.
Right.
I'm not playing him in my season-long league with a championship on the line. And if Hogan goes for 8 and 113 and a touchdown, then so be it, because that's that's just not good lineup construction for your season-long championship. There's too much variance there. You need targets. You need opportunities. There's going to be guys, if you need a last-minute punt on your waiver wire, that have gotten that all season. It's not going to be from Chris Hogan.
No, I don't see it as well. I mean, why he hasn't been able to get more than 3 targets in a lot of these games, and I'm going through his game logs right now as we speak. And yes, in Week 7 against the Bears, I know he went 6 receptions, 7 targets. I get that. But where has that been the rest of the season? Okay. Remember, Ben, he was 1 for 5, 3 for 5 at the beginning of the year without Edelman.
Right. There's a lot. It's a tough decision in the sense that you hate to bench Gronk in your season-long league or go to somebody and adjust on the fly. So in that second, I don't think that's the way to go. A couple more coming in. Seth, I see yours. We'll get to yours coming up next. One more from Mr. Sports Take. He says, what's your confidence level in PPR if you had to rank them between Elijah McGuire, Kenyon Drake, and Damian Williams? So Drake is in a weird spot, right? Because you would think that Kalen Ballage comes in, Frank Gore out. Drake should take over this role. And he's an unbelievably explosive player. But Miami just has given full indication that they want this to be a committee. So the difference is now you're dealing with Damian Williams and Elijah McGuire that we know are going to be get the majority of the carries. McGuire probably even more so than Williams, but Williams is in the far more explosive offense. So I think we're deciding in PPR between Damian Williams and Elijah McGuire. And because it's PPR, I think I'm leaning Damian Williams here.
Yep, Williams, McGuire, and then Drake, who I can't trust at all.
Yeah.
And in fact...
And I wanted to. I loved Kenyon Drake coming into this season.
And I know Adam Gase is on the hot seat and he's going to have to win, but you know what the good thing about Miami is they're very limited with the amount of weapons and fully healthy weapons that they have. I'm thinking that Kalen Ballage is a very good flex option for this week, Ben.
Yeah, I think he's explosive enough to be able to make a difference, but I don't know if I trust him. We've seen only a little bit of tape on him, so I look at him as more of a tournament dart throw than I do for a season long. I know that's a decision that you have to make this week.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this then. So let's take 2 guys we were just talking about, Kalen Ballage versus Chris Hogan. Where do you stand?
I would go Ballage because I feel more secure at the running back position.
Right. Kenyon Drake is not going to be, even if he does get more carries and he is out there for more snaps, I understand that. And that's because it's by default. Why this guy hasn't, I mean, Frank Gore at times this season looked like the better running back.
I know.
This guy
makes no sense.
The hills. Kenyon Drake has been one of the biggest letdowns all season long. And it stinks, Ben. It really stinks because going into next year, everybody's going to be remembering the miracle in Miami when he scored that touchdown. He was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, but he still scored and it was still a difference.
That was.
Oh, I agree.
He did, but
all right, fair enough. Fair enough. We can move on from our Kenyon Drake hate. Let's go to Seth on Periscope. He's got a flex and a half-point PPR. Just needs one between Damian Williams, Alfred Blue, Alshon Jeffrey, and Robbie Anderson. This is a tough one. A tough one. I would say, Fensty, that we can go ahead and rule out Alfred Blue because he's terrible. And that's between Damian Williams, Alshon Jeffrey, and Robbie Anderson in half-point PPR. I would make the argument that the safest play would be Damian Williams. You know he's going to get the rock. You know he's going to get opportunities in the passing game. I think he is the higher floor play. But if we believe that Robbie Anderson has a chance to go off today, and Alshon Jeffrey's got a great connection with Nick Foles, which of those two do we agree is maybe the higher upside play? I would go with Robbie Anderson.
So would I in this matchup. And because of what we were talking about with the Jets as well, the Jets also don't have many other options. So when you know he's getting the targets, you've seen what he's done since returning from injury. He's 100%. So when it comes to between those two, I'm going with Damian Williams, though, overall. I'm going to be safer in this play, especially with the news that Ware is out now.
Yes, with Ware being out, Seth, I think if you're trying to win a championship and you feel good about your team going in, now if you need an absolute punt play and you need just all the upside in the world, then I'd say probably go Anderson here. But I think your safest play, and Fensty and I both agree here, is Damian Williams. From Drew, checking in on Facebook Live. It is a tough quarterback toss-up, Fensty, between a guy that we were just talking about earlier in the show with Aaron Rodgers or Jared Goff. You know, people have been riding Jared Goff for the first 13 weeks of the season. They thought they were going to go right to this championship. All of a sudden, that Lions game comes along off the bye, and he looks bad. Then against the Bears, he looks terrible. And then last week, almost even worse for Jared Goff. So it's a great matchup. It's on the road at Arizona. Rodgers has a great matchup as well, but he's playing hurt. This is a tough one here. Where are you going?
Let's just say this with Jared Goff last week, is that he was very, very close for getting more points. That Reynolds touchdown took him down a little bit of a peg, so get that Reynolds touchdown getting overturned. So with that, I'm still sticking with Jared Goff here, but it's very, very close for me. Looking at what he's done versus Arizona, I love the numbers.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. I would say Goff is for sure the safer option. Like I said, if you're playing on fantasy sports markets and you're playing Devontae Adams, you can absolutely consider playing Aaron Rodgers here. I also just think, especially with potentially no Gurley, that they're just going to set up Goff for all these different intermediate routes down the middle of the field. I think Robert Woods has a really big day today. Like, I think especially in the middle of the field, yep. I know that Peterson can shadow if he wants to, so my guess is that if he's going to shadow, he'll likely shadow Brandon Cooks. But, Sean McVay is so good at getting the mismatch that he'll find guys in the right place, and I think Woods especially is the beneficiary here, because normally they're used to checkdowns to Gurley to be able to move the sticks. I think that guy becomes Robert Woods today, so I'm likely to go with Jared Goff. Even though I think both of them are pretty standard plays. I think both of them I like a lot today. From YouTube.
Yep, I agree with you completely.
Vigilante 808 says, what's up, guys? Do I go with Chris Hogan or Deshaun Hamilton? So, like we said, we both don't love Chris Hogan a lot today, and I think Deshaun Hamilton is probably in a better spot, even though it's on the road. It's against Oakland. That sets up very well for him. I am of the belief that the Raiders, and maybe I'm buying into the narrative, in perhaps their final home game at the Coliseum, could possibly play really, really well. And I don't know if they'll necessarily shut down Denver. It's not necessarily a high-octane offense. I think from a safer perspective, I would much rather go Deshaun Hamilton here.
Yep, and I'm in very similar situations in my leagues right now, Ben, and Hamilton will be in a couple of my lineups for this matchup against Oakland.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. Still have a few more minutes, guys, for your questions. Again, when you're heading over to fantasysportsmarkets.com, don't forget to use the promo code NFL18. That'll get you $5 to use on us at fantasysportsmarkets.com. Non-salary DFS. You can draft the team that you want to do. You can play the guys that you want to play. If you want to do an entire stack of New Orleans players or Pittsburgh players or Chiefs, you can do that as well over at Fantasy Sports Markets. There's no salary cap getting in the way of playing the guys that you want to play. Fensty, as far as some of the other matchups go, are there any that stand out to you? We talked a little bit about Green Bay and the Jets. We talked about Kansas City and Seattle. I think one that a lot of people are intrigued by is what to do with Carolina and Atlanta, with Taylor Heineke getting the start there. We're not sure as to whether or not Julio is 100%, although he's likely to go. Remember that blow-up game from Julio came against Carolina. So what's your expectation for this game? Over-unders actually moved down about 3 points from 47.5 down to 44.5 because of the Heineke news.
Yeah, no, and that's for obvious reasons there. The thing is with the Falcons, I actually put this prediction down on one of our shows on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, that even if Julio does play, then I'm expecting both Ridley and Sanu to get in the end zone against Carolina this week.
Interesting. So you think that they funnel coverage towards Julio and that opens things up for both Ridley and Sanu? Mm-hmm. Interesting. So then would you... Well, then let me ask you this. Would you consider Matt Ryan as a tournament play to pair him up with one of those guys, if not both of them?
Yep. Tournament lineups. I think that one thing with Carolina is that their secondary is something that you could easily... We're talking about Houston secondary. I kind of view Carolina in that similar area, that echelon of that you could destroy, especially if you're looking for big upside plays. So with that, I'm thinking that Carolina is one of, like Houston, one of those other secondaries that you can definitely produce on.
As we wait for a couple more questions, any sort of final predictions, any maybe surprise plays that you like this week? You mentioned a handful of guys so far on the show today. At the quarterback spot, I think that's a lot of those places where you can find value. Do you think Matt Ryan, probably of all the guys, your surprise quarterback that you think can really light it up today?
No, I think that I love that matchup. I really do love the matchup. Now, I don't love it as much as some of the other quarterbacks that we talked about here, especially, say, Russell Wilson. I'm more than Russell Wilson. I like Russell Wilson more. Deshaun Watson more than Ryan. But Ryan is up there if you're looking in the Beat Benny Heights contest to make a difference to that unique play. Also, you know what? Aaron Rodgers, though, we just can't forget about that because he's not chalk.
Right.
So that falls that value play for you.
One guy that I think could be a legitimate boom or a legitimate bust today is Kirk Cousins. On the road at Detroit. You can throw on the Lions now, and the Lions have improved substantially in stopping the run, and I think a lot of people are going to want to play Dalvin Cook after what they saw from him last week when he was arguably one of the best running backs on the slate. I think what the Lions are going to do is they're going to go all out to try and stop Dalvin Cook in the running game. And I think it opens up Adam Thielen, who had a really bad game last week. I think Stephon Diggs gets himself in play. You could do a full-on Cousins, Thielen, Diggs stack, run it back with Golladay. And that's a really high-risk, high-reward type lineup. But I think there's a really good chance that Cousins could ball out today. But I also think that same type of chance could be for him to just totally go Kirk Cousins on us as well. Is that too much of a reach, you think, in tournaments?
A little bit. I don't want that much exposure in, but I do get what you were saying about Dalvin Cook. I mean, the matchup you would think is good, but the Lions have improved a little bit more. So that's where I'm probably staying away from the Vikings for the most part today. On the other side of that matchup, Matthew Stafford and Kenny Golladay both expected to play according to reports.
Periscope message coming in from Big Mike 82. Is Indy a top 5 defense this week against the Giants? So I think if we're looking at our favorite defenses this week, I think we both would agree that we really like the Bears against San Francisco, right? We like the Rams against Arizona on the road. Miami could potentially be in play against Jacksonville at home, New England against Buffalo, maybe Minnesota on the road against Detroit, although the Vikings defense, sometimes it's just very difficult to figure them out. But where do we...
What about Denver?
I know
you have your narrative with Oakland.
We should really like Denver. You could probably put Denver in that conversation as well. But where does Indy fit in, especially after that shutout win against the Cowboys last week? Would you put them top 5?
Right after. I kind of view them in that same area as Cleveland. So right after that top 5, maybe rounding out the top 5.
I think Cleveland, Indy, and Miami are sort of all in that like next tier down after the elite level plays this week. So they're a great play, but I think you can find some better ones, like if you're playing at fantasy sports markets this week. Right?
No, you know what? I mean, like I said, I'm not forgetting about the Falcons either. I mean, they are playing an inexperienced quarterback. So, Again, that's another team that's in that echelon, too, for me.
Totally understood. All right, Fancy, let's get to our favorite cash plays over at Fantasy Sports Markets. Again, remember, go to fantasysportsmarkets.com. Use the promo code NFL18. It's $5 on us. No deposit required, although you're going to want to make a deposit so you can play in our Beat Danny Duffy NBA Christmas Challenge. It is out there. It is the top contest you will see at fantasysportsmarkets.com. 100% of the proceeds will go and benefit pediatric cancer research with Noah's Bandage Project. You can win some great prizes from the Royal Star pitcher Danny Duffy, signed merchandise, signed baseballs, and the top 20 winners, Fensty, will get $50 to fantasysportsmarkets.com to be able to use. That's just a nice opportunity to play a bunch of DFS with us. You already have it in your account. And if you beat Danny's lineup, his Laker-infused NBA lineup, you get $5. So you basically get a chance to go head-to-head against a professional athlete in DFS. All right, Fancy, as we wrap this puppy up, let's go through our favorite plays on the day. At quarterback, I'm a believer in Pat Mahomes, even on the road Sunday night in Seattle. I think pairing him with Tyreek Hill in tournaments is a really interesting play. Tyreek Hill has been so good on the road in primetime games that I feel like this is one of those spots where you're going to want to have exposure to him. So I love him here, and I think Andrew Luck, assuming T.Y. Hilton plays, is probably my favorite cash play.
Nice. I mean, I'm going on the other side of that matchup, and I'm going Russell Wilson for mine, and also looking at that Pittsburgh-New Orleans game with both Big Ben and Drew Brees for mine as well.
I anticipate both of those guys will probably be the highest owned quarterbacks over at Fantasy Sports Markets between Big Ben and Drew Brees, with everybody anticipating the shootout. At the running back side, I think you have 5 really good ones to choose from between Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, and then Nick Chubb, I think, is a part of that conversation now as well with how badly he crushed Cincinnati last time. Is there any that you prefer more so than the others?
Nope, you mentioned Nick Chubb there, but we can't forget about on the other side of that matchup with Joe Mixon as well, because since he is so it's almost a very safe floor. Not almost. It is a very safe floor for Joe Mixon. So he's also in that mix too.
Okay, fair enough.
Unintended.
I think if I'm going with any as a favorite today, I like Ezekiel Elliott as my probably top chalk guy, but I think he's got to be in every lineup this week. Wide receiver side, you have a really intriguing matchup. We talked about Michael Thomas. He is at home. DeAndre Hopkins is going to play. Antonio Brown perhaps could even get more targets with no Juju Smith-Schuster if he is not able to go or if he's not at 100%. And then the cash lock every week, Devontae Adams.
No, you mentioned them all right there. If there's anybody else that I could think about now, Ben, you may want to put some confidence in Diggs or Thielen. So I'm almost wondering if we also put them in that mix as well, because you see in the Vikings offense today against Detroit.
I like them in tournaments. I don't think I can roster anybody in cash. I think if it were in Minnesota, I would feel slightly differently. On the road, Cousins can be a little bit more unpredictable. So I think in this situation, I'm probably looking at. Normally, I'd look at Thielen in cash every week. But he's not going to have Darius Slay. He's going to have an advantageous match. I guess you could consider Adam Thielen for cash this week. And you'll get him at pretty low ownership because everyone's going to either be on Hopkins or Thomas or Antonio Brown or Devontae Adams. Maybe a few of them will throw in Julio or Tyreek Hill. But yeah, I think Adam Thielen is in play as well. And then Robert Woods is a guy that I also really like this week. And finally, Fensty tight end. Kelsey, if you're like Mahomes, you got to love Kelsey. He is closing in on Rob Gronkowski's record. Zach Ertz, even though he had a bad week last week, he's once again in play. And then Kittle and Ebron, I think, round out those two guys. Maybe Evan Ingram. Does he make the list for you this week?
I was just about to say my buddy Jeff Nance from Guru Elite was actually saying and going over numbers on Friday on his Guru Elite show where if you look at the numbers without Odell Beckham Jr. Now, Evan Ingram has not been able to score since he's gone out, but Evan Ingram is in a great position today because you're just seeing the percentage and seeing how much more involved he is in this offense when Odell Beckham Jr. is not out there. So Evan Ingram is definitely in play today.
He had an awesome year last year, and I think because of the injuries, people just forgot about him. But they use him like a wide receiver in that offense, and especially when you're slow and Eli, and you're not getting the ball out deep down the field. Evan Ingram makes a whole lot of sense. Certainly more trustworthy than that of Sterling Shepard. And then finally, the defense spot, Fensty. I'm going with the Rams. I think Arizona's offense. I know it's possibly Larry Fitzgerald's last home game. I just don't trust anything about him. I think the Rams are going to get to Rosen plenty of times. They're going to force some turnovers. I think this is a get-right spot for everybody on the Rams today.
Right. No, that's a good call for you. Not only do they have one of the best matchups there as well. By the way, Larry Fitzgerald, I'm reading reports that he does want to return next year. So for those that are creating narratives in their head, let's pump the brakes on them a little bit. So
there you go.
Rams are in a good spot today. The Bears are in a good spot today. I asked you about the Vikings before. I like we talked about, I think Cleveland is in a good spot today. Even though the spread is huge, it's still Cincinnati. They're not that good. They're so hurt too. So I like Cleveland in that spot as well.
So there you go. There you go. Those are our top cash plays over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. Please remember to go and check it out. Use that promo code NFL18 for $5 on us at fantasysportsmarkets.com. And I will say this, in Fensty, we've talked about this. Please, just if you're playing fantasy sports, this is a great way to give back. Even if you enter one lineup, it's just $5 in the Beat Danny Duffy contest for Christmas Day. You can always change your team. You can go back and you can move your lineups around leading up until the start of the tip. It is a wonderful cause. It is helping out kids fighting pediatric cancer. And I really implore all of you guys, when you're at fantasysportsmarkets.com, to go in, make a team, make a couple of them, tell your friends about it. Even if you don't know anything about basketball, if football's been your sport, play the chalk. You got as good of a chance to win as anybody, especially in this type of a slate. I really think this is a golden opportunity to help out some kids, especially during the holiday season, that are fighting something that many of us can't even begin fighting when we're at that age.
No, you're 100% right. And for those that do not know how to play daily fantasy basketball, this is what you do. Number one, you're going to go on Fantasy Sports Markets right now, and you're going to submit a bunch of Milwaukee Bucks in your lineups. And also in that Lakers-Warriors game as well, you're going to want to stack the hell out of it from both sides, because that is going to be a shootout, as most games are these days in the NBA. And also, for those that want a little bit more of assistance, I'm going to be on the air on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports.
That's right.
Radio this Tuesday, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. It's the DFS Holiday Hoop Special leading right up to roster lock. So let your boy Santa Fensty help you out and beat Danny Duffy for a good cause.
Yeah, so that's a must-listen-to show, Fensty, this Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, Fensty will tweet out the link for all the details and information. His show is Can't Miss Radio. You got to pay attention and be a part of it. And then, of course, you can read his work over at fantasyalarm.com and catch him next Saturday as well for Wake Up Fantasy Sports beginning at 6 a.m. East Coast time. And occasionally, if you wake up early enough, you might hear your boy join Fensty as well. Good luck in Week 16, everybody. Fensty, any last words before we head out?
Always dominate, no other option. Get in to win. There's still time. All it takes is one great week to redeem an entire lost fantasy season. So crush it.
Let's make it happen. For Fensty, I'm Ben. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for being a part of the show. Good luck in Week 16, and remember to sign up for the Beat Danny Duffy contest for pediatric cancer research at fantasysportsmarkets.com. Be good, guys. Good luck.